Hello! It's the Pageant Nerd here, recapping 10 of the biggest pageant stories of 2021. As the headlines for the 2022 pageant season are yet to be written, now's the perfect time to look back at an eventful past 12 months at the news, controversies, and history-making moments that had the pageant world talking all year long. Before we get started, if you've watched my videos and like what you see, please hit the subscribe button, if you haven't already. And of course, if you enjoy this video, a thumbs up would be much appreciated. Okay, without further ado, in random order, here's my list of the 10 biggest pageant stories of 2021. Let's face it, anything and everything that happened in 2021, and 2020 for that matter, but hopefully not all of 2022. Anyway, as I was saying, nearly everything that happened or was meant to happen in 2021 was affected in some way by COVID-19. The world of pageantry was no exception, and the competitions responded in a variety of ways. Incredibly, both Miss Universe and Miss Grand International managed to hold two competitions each in 2021, ones earlier in the year as delayed 2020 editions, and as second at year's end, their 2021 versions. Oddly, it's the third time in less than a decade Miss Universe has had two pageants in the same calendar year. The 2014 and 2016 editions were actually held in January 2015 and 2017 respectively, but the 2020 edition occurred in May 2021, the longest delay in the pageant's history. Miss International was cancelled for a second straight year, and Miss World 2021, having skipped 2020, was postponed until March 2022. The original 2021 competition was called off a matter of hours before finals night on December 16, after an unfortunate COVID outbreak amongst pageant contestants and staff. Miss World's 2020 cancellation meant that both it and Miss Universe are 70 editions old, assuming everything goes to plan this March. Also, for a second straight year, Miss Earth conducted a virtual pageant.
I don't know if you know that you are now crowned Miss Earth 2021!
Hats off for a reduced carbon footprint, I suppose. But a shame for Miss Earth 2020, Lindsay Coffey of the USA, who didn't get to win or pass on her crown in the real world. Another impact COVID had was on the lengths of the victorious Queen's reigns. For the cancelled pageants, the reigning Miss International from Thailand, who won her title in November 2019, will hold that honour for 3 full years, should Miss International 2022 go ahead at the end of this year. Her reign will exceed that of Germany's Ingrid Finger, who held the 1965 Miss International title for 20 months. Miss International was initially discontinued in 1966, but revived in time for the 1967 edition. There's a story behind that, but that's for another time. Toni Ann Singh of Jamaica will hold her 2019 Miss World crown for a record 27 months, should the delayed 2021 edition go ahead as planned in March. At the other end are the unlucky queens who had a shortened reign after winning COVID-delayed 2020 pageants and passing on their title at the end of 2021. Mexico's Andrea Meza held the Miss Universe title for just 7 months, the shortest completed reign in that pageant's 7-decade history, while the USA's Abina Appiah reigned as Miss Grand International for just over 8 months. Controversy landed in a handful of pageants in 2021, either due to the plight of contestants and their homeland, or the political situation in a host country. Israel was the surprise host of Miss Universe 2021 after earlier negotiations with Costa Rica fell through. The Miss Universe organisation drew harsh criticism for choosing the Middle East nation for its 70th anniversary edition, largely due to Israel's alleged atrocities against Palestinians. Several countries like Indonesia and Malaysia pulled out citing COVID concerns, but cynics assumed other reasons. The South African government withdrew support for Lalena Mswane, who received death threats ahead of the pageant. But she stood her ground, returning South Africa to the latter stages with a second runner-up placement. Myanmar's 2020 representatives at Miss Universe and Miss Grand International were outspoken opponents of their country's military takeover, forcing one of them to defect to the United States. And the eventual Miss Grand International 2021 from Vietnam angered the Thai military government with a gesture seemingly in support of pro-democracy protesters in the pageant's host country. Good to see some queens not just talking about world peace. Time to officially congratulate the successful queens and countries that made a mark in the past 12 months. First of all, the title holders. At Miss Universe, Mexico and India, which both collected their third crowns by winning the 2020 and 21 pageants respectively. More on Andrea Meza in my next segment, but the current Miss Universe, India's Harnaz Sandhu, created history by becoming the first Miss Universe to have been born since the turn of the millennium. In fact, Harnaz won the 70th Miss Universe, having been 70 days old when India last won the title, by Lara Dutta in 2000. It was first-time victories at the remainder of the major competitions, the USA and Vietnam at the two Miss Grand Internationals held last year. Namibia, victorious at Miss Supranational 2021, its first big international crown since Miss Universe 1992. And Belize, whose Miss Earth 2021 title is its first ever at a major international pageant. The Philippines had plenty of cause for celebration, achieving its 12th straight Miss Universe placement, the longest active streak and fourth best all time. In case you were wondering, Indonesia has the longest active placement streak at Miss World, with 9 between 2011 and the most recent competition in 2019. Back to the Philippines, and they returned to the Miss Universe top 5 for the first time in 3 years, and elsewhere won Miss Intercontinental, Miss Globe, Miss Aura International, Miss Culture International and Miss Interglobal, plus first runner-up results at Miss Grand International and Miss Eco International. Congrats! Another nation that didn't win a major title but made an impact nonetheless was South Africa, with top 5 finishes at Miss Universe, Miss Supranational and Miss Grand International. Kudos to Paraguay for its best ever result at an alpha pageant. The Bahamas for its first ever placement at Miss Universe, where Bahrain made its debut. And Somalia for sending its first delegate to Miss World, the first hijabi contestant in the pageant's history. While it's not uncommon for women to compete in multiple pageant systems, either nationally or internationally, the past 12 months saw a high number of crossover queens feature prominently. At Miss Universe, all of the top 3 in 2020 had notable prior results, none more incredible than Mexico's Andrea Meza, the first woman in history to go from Miss World first runner-up to Miss Universe. The feat had been achieved the other way around on 3 previous occasions. It's just a shame that Andrea's reign was an abbreviated one, as mentioned earlier. It was a similar story for Miss Grand International 2020 Abina Appiah, who passed on her title after only 8 months. Abina had previously represented Ghana at Miss Universe 2014 and Miss Earth 2019, among other international competitions. Her persistence was most definitely rewarded, as it was for her MGI first runner-up, Samantha Bernardo of the Philippines, who competed once at Miss World Philippines and 3 times at Binibining Pilipinas before being selected to represent her country. One final notable crossover in the past year was Valeria Ayas of Colombia, who followed up a top 4 result at Miss Earth 2018 with a top 5 finish at Miss Universe 2021. As I mentioned earlier, Beatriz Luigi Gomez's top 5 finish at Miss Universe 2021 was celebrated for multiple reasons, one of which being she's the first out LGBT contestant to represent the Philippines at a major international pageant. And globally, she's a pioneer. While previous Miss Universe runners-up, Yulia Lemigova and Patricia Rodriguez, are openly gay, neither of them were out while they competed. At a national level, Filipino-born Cataluna Enriquez became the first trans woman to compete in the Miss USA competition, having won Miss Nevada USA last June.
But today, where there's so many surgeries and so many people out there who have a need to change for a happier life, I do accept that because I believe it's a free country.
Miss Universe has allowed trans women to compete internationally since 2012, with Spain sending the historic first ever trans delegate to Miss Universe in 2018. But there's still more work to be done. Until all national pageants, along with international ones, remove this barrier to entry, these types of milestones will continue to be necessary and celebrated. And finally, also at Miss Universe, Parnaz Sandhu's winning evening gown was created by renowned Indian designer Saisha Shinde, who came out as a trans woman just 1 year ago. For the most part, our competing queens lived up to the whole notion of sisterhood during this past year, but there are a couple of minor exceptions. While Miss Universe 2020 first runner-up Julia Gama was a fan favourite, apparently the Miss Brazil organisers didn't share that same affection by the end of her reign. Julia was uninvited from passing on her title. Exactly why isn't known, although it's rumoured to be due to a poor attitude and behaviour. That didn't stop Julia from performing her own farewell walk for her fans on social media, and later having her own Vice Miss Universe sash created. Quite the bold move, especially since by then that title belonged to a woman from Paraguay. And a couple of possible cases of sour grapes. Michelle Marie Colon was caught on camera questioning the selection of India as Miss Universe 2021. It may or may not have been taken out of context, but Miss Universe Puerto Rico's subsequent comments didn't exactly clear things up.
I just wish the best luck to the Miss Universe winner. I know that she has so many people who support her.
Something much clearer was Miss Chile's response to India's victory, namely her less than enthusiastic applause. Maybe Antonia should have taken a leaf out of Nancy Pelosi's playbook. As I've mentioned in other videos, another trend, a worrying one to me, is the ever-increasing focus on delegates speaking English in international competitions. More and more pageant finalists and winners in recent years have been proficient, if not fluent in English, even when they represent countries where English isn't an official language. Case in point is the quick chat with Steve Harvey after delegates are announced as Miss Universe semi-finalists. This has happened in the 5 most recent times Steve has hosted, and you probably know my thoughts on that. If not, click the link in the corner. Of the 85 women who've done that chat since 2016, not a single one of them used a translator. One assumes they weren't made available, unlike in other parts of the competition. In some cases, it was abundantly clear a non-English speaking delegate had rehearsed a pre-prepared answer. I get it. These global pageant organisations are businesses, ones that need a spokesperson to effectively represent their brand. And English is the global language of business. But should non-English speakers even be bothered to enter anymore if they hold legitimate hopes of winning an international title? Could an international pageant organisation not focus its efforts for a year on the market where the reigning title holder's language is spoken? Easier said than done, I know. But I truly hope international pageants and their supposed celebrations of diversity broaden their horizons in this particular area. Now, I don't want to point out any particular groups of fans here, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, this topic is something that's disturbed me in the time I've been more active in the online pageant fan community. As a YouTuber, you get subjected to all sorts of commentary. It comes with the territory. And to this point, I've been fortunate not to receive anything overly hateful or upsetting. But that can't be said more generally. Rivalries between pageant fans of different nationalities create their fair share of toxic behaviour, let alone the comments directed at pageant contestants themselves and even pageant organisation staff. Miss Supranational Creative Director Andre Slay got himself into a pickle last year, caught making offensive remarks about pageant fans from one country that were unhappy with their bet's final result in the 2021 pageant. By his own admission, Andre said some things he shouldn't have, but he in turn was undeserving of the trolling he received beforehand, including death threats. As much as I love pageantry, this is a side of it that I just can't accept in any way, shape or form. In the coming year, I'm going to play my very small part in helping flush this toxicity out of our community. And I'd love it if you join me too. Call out bad behaviour, remind people of the impact of their words. It's a huge task, but that shouldn't stop us from trying. Ending on a more positive note, and body positivity remained a topic of discussion this past year. It's a conversation that shifted in tone, for the better, after Sierra Burchell's exploits at Miss Universe 2016. In the past 2 Miss Universes, we saw at least 2 women challenge beauty queen stereotypes. In the 2020 edition, Australia's Maria Thattil, at 5'3" or 1'60", proved that height is no longer a barrier to reaching the top 10. Angelique Scott-Kemmis delivered a powerful message of real-size beauty, winning the 2021 Miss Universe Thailand crown and proudly competing in Israel. And a special shout out to American Emma Loney, who's blazing a trail in the Miss USA and Miss Earth USA systems, confidently representing plus-size women. Well, there you have it, my 10 biggest pageant stories of 2021. Which story stood out the most to you? Did I leave any stories out? Tell me what you think in the comments below, but as always, please play nice. If you're looking for your next clip to watch, I invite you to check out the dozens of other videos I've made so far. Just click my profile name below. All that's left for me to do is to wish you a happy new year. I hope you, your loved ones and fellow pageant lovers have a safe, healthy, happy and memorable 2022. Memorable in a good way, that is. I'll be back soon with my next video, but in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, the Pageant